Right, if you are here with us for the first time this Sunday morning, as you might have gleaned from what we've talked about this morning, we are in the midst of the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount has been so captivating week after week for us. And this week we're going to find ourselves in Matthew 6, starting in verse 19. So if you'd like to follow along, you can turn there. We will be there in a few moments as we look at what Jesus continues to teach in the Sermon on the Mount. Before we jump into that, though, I want you to step into a hypothetical with me. I want you to use your imagination. So picture this. Your house is about to burn down, and you know you're going to get out. You're going to be safe. Your family will be safe. Your pets will be safe. You have 90 seconds to go in and grab one thing. You can run in and grab one treasure. So think to yourself, what is it that you're going to go in and grab? Is there something? Does anybody want to shout out in a word or two what you would grab? Feel free to. Family album. Was there something over here? Passport. That's so practical. I would have never considered that. Anything else? What's the treasure, Doncella? Your purse. Yeah. I think what we might grab says a lot about us. We have practical thinkers. We have memories that want to be treasured. I brought one of my treasures this morning because I'm not going to ask you guys a question and not engage with it myself. This is a box that's within a larger box I have. It's a shoebox of not Coca-Cola Santa memorabilia, but can anybody tell what these are? These are ancient relics because back in my day, we used paper tickets to go to sporting events. And I have a shoebox full of these, and it was so fun to peek through them this week. If anybody has been to a Caps game anytime recently, there was a time when you could do that for $5. In the top two rows, they called it the Eagle's Nest, $5 tickets. I really treasure this one from the inaugural year of Jack Kent Cooke Stadium, what then became FedEx Field, which is now Commanders Field, was able to attend a game there. I could go on for an hour. This is not show and tell time. This is a sermon. But the Nats at RFK, ACC tournament at what was MCI Center, then Verizon Center, now Capital One Arena. There are so many memories and treasures in these tickets for me. So with my 90 seconds, I'm getting my ticket shoebox. And what our answers are, whether you shared or whether you were thinking it, whatever your answer is, it says something about you. For me, I think it's that I treasure the memories that those paper tickets entail. And I mean, not to get sappy, but I spent like half an hour looking through the tickets, and I could remember going to this game with my dad, and which of my dad's friends and my dad's friend's son went to that game with us. We had a season ticket set for college football and looking at all those. So many, basically, family reunions before those. They just note that they're memories that I treasure. And as we continue in the Sermon on the Mount this morning, we're going to see Jesus teach about treasure in a way that is both disruptive. As we've just heard and as we've heard for weeks, Jesus is disruptive in his teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. But I think what Jesus has to say today is disruptive and freeing. So let's look at the verses we're going to focus on. It's going to be Matthew 6, 19 through 24. You can follow along on the screens behind me here. This is Jesus teaching right after where we left off with the Lord's Prayer last Sunday. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. You will either hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. That's the end of our passage for today. So we'll start with the last thing we read there, and we'll start with money. If we want to be obedient to the teaching of Jesus that we see here in the Sermon on the Mount, we cannot serve money. That's the last sentence there in verse 24. Now, I suspect few, if any, in the sanctuary right now or worshiping online, none of us would probably claim to intentionally serve money. We know better than that. But money is powerful. And even if we don't think that we serve money, it can control how we think and how we interact with others and how we view the world. It's natural for people to turn to money to feel a sense of control or to feel power or to feel what we're all striving for in contentment. So we're going to think through what this looks like practically in light of what Jesus is asking us to consider here in the Sermon on the Mount. Is money the source of, in your life, and thank you to Marin for leaning into this with us, is it the source of our sense of control in life? Is it the source of how we feel like we have or wield power? And how much is it contributing to our feelings of contentment in life? I think it's a fair question to ask, can money even achieve these aims? What would that even look like? If you feel like your life is volatile for some reason, you might take comfort in looking at your bank account. It could be that seeing a balance on a retirement statement calms a temporary anxiety. If you can sit back and say, you know what, I see X amount of dollars waiting for me in the future, so things aren't that bad in the present. Money, similarly, it can give you a sense of power as well. You might be deceived into thinking you have all the power if your monthly income exceeds your monthly expenses by a certain amount. If you have the power to be the first domino that moves, that pays all the bills and controls every comfort that you have, you might think you hold the power. And whether it's $100 or whether it's $1 million, money can lead to a sense of contentment. I can remember the joy I felt as a kid getting a $5 bill and a birthday card. I felt on top of the world. And still, I think many of us in here, if you open a card with cash in it, you're probably going to smile. Because it's possible, if you aren't stressing about paying bills, you can cast worry aside in the present and live with a sense of contentment. These concepts are probably familiar for you. I know they are for me at times, but the reality is, in light of what Jesus is saying here in Matthew 6, it is a dangerous way to think. If we derive our sense of control, our sense of power, and our contentment from money, we are serving money. And Jesus is clear in verse 24 there, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So how can God fill what we're talking about here? If we are turning to money to bring a sense of control and peace and order and satisfaction in our life, how can God replace that? You could have plenty of money when it comes to thinking about your sense of control in life. It might be that your bank account makes you feel like everything's okay, but then when life takes a turn for the worse, you are probably not going to find a sense of security or a sense of control in your net worth or in your balance. When a person learns bad news, their impulse is probably going to be to go to God, to seek something higher than themselves, rather than turning to a bank statement for a sense of deliverance. If we serve God, if we take what Jesus is saying seriously here, God will be the foundation of our sense of control and of our sense of security, not just in times that are challenging or taxing, but in times that are good as well. We are not in control. Money is not in control, and it's with God that we can find that sense of order and that sense of peace that we're craving. And it's with serving God that comes and is a reality in our life. Think about what brings you a sense of power in life right now. Does it have anything to do with how you serve God? Or does it have anything to do with the amount of money and or status you have? How we relate as people and as followers of Jesus, how we relate to people with more or less money than we have speaks volumes about our maturity in response to what Jesus is talking about here. It speaks volumes about our trust in God. If your instinct around people who have more money than you is jealousy, then there's work to be done between you and God when it comes to serving God more than serving money. And if your instinct around people who have less money than you is to be dismissive or to cast them aside, then there's work to be done between you and God about serving God more than serving money. If God is your master, if God has your devotion above all else, you can go to that party at that wealthy friend or wealthy neighbor's house and not feel jealous and not feel judgmental. The freedom that God can bring you in that will allow you to look past the material things, past that which might make you jealous, and you can connect with the heart of that person. You can wear your heart on your sleeve of loving and serving God in a way that could be a legitimate lifeline to them. This is a really serious lane of mission that if we're a church that cares for the world around us, that we need to be pursuing. Because people with a very nice car, they need God just as much as someone who has very, very little. And if we find our power in God rather than finding our power in money, we can put aside any jealousy, any attempts to want to be competitive. We can put that aside and legitimately change someone's life by being in a relationship with them, one that ultimately points them to Jesus and points them to what matters most in your life. On the other hand, no matter how much money you have, there is very likely someone who has less money than you. So think about, how do you relate to those who have less money than you? Do you feel a sense of power, or do you feel a sense of superiority? Not if you're truly serving God. If God is the source of your sense of power, it's natural to relate to those who might have less means than you, to look them in the eye, to know them, to know their name, to know their needs, and to advocate for their well-being, both practically and as a friend. Doing that is advocating for someone in a way that isn't laced with power, but that's laced with love. And to bring this back to Jesus, that is what God did for us. God looked at us in a way that wasn't laced in power, in a way that wasn't transactional, but God looked at us through a lens of love. God laid down everything for us, and God didn't see humanity as lesser. God could have looked at the world, he could have looked at us and placed a label of sinner and moved on, but this Jesus that we see preaching in the Sermon on the Mount here in Matthew 6 is going to continue to minister. He's going to go on to Jerusalem, and he's going to bear the cross for the sake of the world. This is the power of God, the power of God that is laced in love. And as we hear God preaching to us through Jesus here, if we want to be obedient to Jesus' teaching, if we want to live like Jesus, we need to have that sacrificial spirit when we're around people who have way more than us and when we're around people who have way less than us. It says a lot about who we are, and it says a lot about where we think power comes from. Thinking about contentment here, in a quiet moment, if you have those in life, in a quiet moment, what leads you to a feeling of contentment? This one is so simple, yet I think it's huge. If you serve God above all else, God works in you in a way that you're not wanting things like you maybe used to want. You don't need to hit a certain professional benchmark to feel content. You don't need to attain that possession you've had your eye on to feel contentment. When you have God, you have the world. You might not have every answer, but you have that assurance that your trust is in something that is greater than yourself and greater than anything we can fathom to turn to here on earth. I'm not going to argue that one of these three categories here is conceptually stronger than the other when it comes to demonstrating God's hold on our life, but I found that the contentment factor is a very sneaky and powerful path to demonstrate how God is at work in your life. People don't really know what to do with a content person today. If someone is content with substance behind it. I have seen so much stress built up around keeping up with societal standards or norms or achieving benchmarks at the same progression as your peers or just aggressively striving for what's next. There's so much stress that can build in to pushing your life in that direction. And amidst all of that, contentment rooted in God is a powerful witness. Now, it's not wrong to seek progress, but it is wrong to serve material gains over heavenly ones. Jesus is clear here in his teaching that you can have one master. I have yet to see serving money lead a person that I've met to live a life that gives them the sense of control and power and contentment that they really want. Yet, I legitimately can't count the number of people I've met in the past and in the present who live a life that brings just such deep peace and joy because of their service to God above all else. Jesus teaches so clearly with visuals here to help us grasp what he's saying. And he talks about treasure as well, kind of like we talked about treasure at the beginning here. It's so applicable to think about our earthly treasures in light of Jesus asking us about our heavenly treasures. I'm curious what you guys think about this. Is it still a thing in the news to talk dismissively about millennials or about the younger generation? Based on the laughs, perhaps. This was hotter a few years ago. But I don't take offense to it. But I love to smile at the headlines about millennials and now Gen Z being blamed for the wrongs in the world. And usually that blame is rooted in the sin of the love for $12 avocado toast. And that then can explain all the issues there. But I do believe that my generation, I'm a millennial, I think millennials and Gen Z are really onto something when it comes to treasure. To an extent, I think they're really onto something. It's been documented, and if you Google it, there's many an article about how people in their 20s and 30s greatly value experiences over possessions. Now, I'm not naive. I know that these experiences aren't overwhelmingly charitable. These experiences are probably spending $1,000 to go see Taylor Swift in Philadelphia instead of buying a nice piece of furniture from your home. But I do think the surrender of stuff is a step in the right direction. And to an extent, I think Jesus would nod at the intent that's going on there. We see Jesus saying in verse 19, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal." What he's talking about here in verse 19 is it's simple. What we accumulate will pass, and it will be dealt with when we pass. One of the two. And I'm intrigued by the shift of experiencing life and something with another person more so than accumulating stuff. I do think that put faith and religion aside, I think at its core, though, there's a spiritual hunger tied to it, and people really are craving something when they realize that the things and the stuff of this world aren't the answers to my deepest cravings. Jesus continues in verse 20, "But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." I don't want to risk being vague here. There's not a tangible heavenly treasure that we should all be seeking or searching out. Storing up treasures in heaven looks like investing your time. It looks like investing your energy. It looks like investing your finances in God's mission in the world. When you give of material things or when you give of your money, that's investing in the kingdom of God, and that is amassing treasure in heaven that changes life on earth. In the same way, when you invest your time, our time is a valuable asset that we have to give. When we invest our time in God's work, we're not walking away with a token or a trophy or anything tangible that identifies we invested that time, but we are making an eternal impact with intangible heavenly treasure, which is what Jesus is getting at here. And what verse 21 says, I hope we can hear loud and clear: "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's not about our things, it's not about our stuff, it's not about our money. It's freeing to hear it's about our Lord. It's about Jesus, God the Son, who has given us the gift of life, a life to live within the mission of God in the world. And we're the ones missing out if we take this for granted. We have this gift of life and the ability to make an eternal impact when we put God above money, when we put God above all else, and when we focus on treasures in heaven. If you need help figuring that out, we would love to talk further. You can talk to me after worship, talk to Pastor Phil. We could connect during the week. If you are craving direction on how to be obedient to what Jesus is talking about here, we want to help you with that. And if you're struggling with the battle that Jesus narrows in on in the last sentence on your screen here, if you're struggling with the battle between God and money, there's no shame in admitting you need help aligning your priorities. We are here to talk if you need guidance, direction, or accountability with that. As I sifted through these verses this week, I was reminded of a friend I had, and still have, who I think did a great job amassing treasures in heaven. I've been friends with this person for a while. I knew them all throughout growing up and at school. And at high school, this friend was amazingly gentle and kind in a way that you don't think high school boys usually tend to be. But one thing led to another, and this friend reached out to one of our classmates who had developmental disabilities and invited that classmate to have lunch with him. And it was countercultural. No one else was doing it. And I was so interested in it that I joined. And it was really special, and it was really bold. And it spoke to the heart of my friend that it would matter more to be kind to store up a treasure in heaven than to make his status rise with his lunch table selection, which was very much a thing from my recollection. And I was on a team with this friend, and one day in the locker room, one of the leaders of the team directed, to my friend, "Good on you boys, way to rack up them heaven points," he said. Heaven points was the terminology he used. So if this morning treasures in heaven doesn't click with you fully, maybe heaven points helps you see what Jesus is talking about in terms of what we're searching after in terms of acts of love and acts of meaning. Now, I want to hit all the verses, so we're going to close real quick with a couple we haven't touched yet, and then a very important point before our band leads us. So the band can come up now, but I want to hit verses 22, 23, just those two. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? We need to fix our eyes on Jesus in worship, and in Jesus, and in life, we need to fix our eyes on Jesus and what matters to God. So in the week ahead, I pray and I encourage you to seek out opportunities to seize and to store up treasures in heaven by doing that which matters to God, to using actions and words that makes God proud. And if you need a different language around it, let's score heaven points this week. And there is no threshold of treasures we must amass or points we must score, because what's really important to close on today is God loves us not because of anything that we do to earn it, or not because of anything we add to it to sweeten the deal. So nothing Jesus is preaching here, nothing that I'm talking about here is to say you must do X, Y, or Z to receive the love of God. God loves us because of nothing we've done, but because solely of God's grace for us. Nothing that we do adds to it. So our response to God's grace should be faithfulness, and it should be obedience to the words of Jesus. And we are getting a lot of words of Jesus here in the Sermon on the Mount. He is worthy of us not just hearing it, not just being in a worship service centered around it, but he is worthy of our obedience, of our faithfulness, and of everything that we have. God is worthy of it all. So let's close by singing just that as the team leads us through Worthy of It All one more time.